What if you were given a glimpse into the afterlife, only to realize that the peace you thought you'd find was a lie? What if death wasn't the escape you were promised, but a nightmare far worse than anything you could have ever imagined? Meet Sajid Khan, a man who thought he had it all figured out, until he came face to face with the darkness that awaits after death. Sajid Khan was a 29-year-old computer programmer living in London. Logical, pragmatic, and driven by a deep sense of order, Sajid lived his life by facts and figures. He believed in science. He didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, or anything supernatural. Death to him was a biological certainty, nothing more. When his time came, he expected nothing but the cold darkness of oblivion. That belief was shattered on a cold, rain-slicked night. Sajid had been working late on a new project, his mind consumed with coding and problem-solving. He decided to call it a night and drove home through the dreary streets of London. The rain was relentless, and the fog was thick, obscuring the roads. He didn't see the oncoming truck as he rounded the corner. The collision was instantaneous. One moment, Sajid was gripping the steering wheel. The next, everything went dark. For what felt like an eternity, there was nothing. No sound, no sensation, no pain, only an endless silence. And then, when Sajid's eyes snapped open, everything had changed. He was no longer in his car, no longer in the world he knew. He was standing in the center of a vast, empty expanse. The sky above him was a swirling mass of black clouds, torn and tornadic, as if reality itself was being ripped apart. The ground beneath his feet was a strange, shifting substance, almost like a thick, oily liquid that gave way as he stepped on it. Panic surged through him. "Where am I?" he called out, his voice lost in the vast emptiness. He was alone, or at least he thought he was. Then in the distance he saw something. Figures. People. Slowly, they started to approach. Sajid squinted. The figures weren't moving like humans. They drifted forward as if they were weightless. Their faces were obscured, blurred like they were being erased from memory. Each of them seemed to be tethered to a dark shadow that trailed behind them, like a reminder of something terrible. "What is this place?" he whispered, his heart thudding in his chest. He tried to turn and run, but his feet wouldn't move. The shadowy figures grew closer, and Sajid felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Then one of them spoke. The voice was distant, otherworldly, but clear enough to pierce through the suffocating silence. "You're not meant to be here, to be." Sajid turned to see a tall figure step forward. The shadow surrounding them seemed to pulse with energy, as if alive. The figure was tall, humanoid, with no real features, just an outline of darkness that shifted constantly. Its voice, when it spoke, was unlike any voice Sajid had ever heard. "You should not have crossed over yet, Sajid Khan. You still have unfinished business." No, I'm not dead. This isn't real," Sajid shouted, panicking. But the figure didn't respond. Instead, it raised a hand, and the world around Sajid began to distort. The ground beneath him cracked, the air thickened, and the once empty space seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Suddenly, Sajid felt as though he was being pulled forward, like a magnet drawing him toward the figure. It was as though the very space around him was dragging him into an inescapable void. His vision blurred, and he could hear whispers, hundreds of whispers, like a chorus of voices murmuring in a language he couldn't understand. His body moved against his will, dragged toward the growing dark shape of the figure. "Stop," he begged. "Please, I don't belong here." But the figure didn't stop. Instead, it opened its mouth, a mouth that shouldn't have existed, and out came a cold, high-pitched laugh that echoed through the empty void. Then, in an instant, everything changed. The ground beneath him shattered like glass, and Sajid was falling, plummeting through an endless void of darkness, endless and suffocating. The screams of those figures he had seen earlier grew louder, now mixed with the sound of something worse, scraping, tearing, as if something in the distance was being dragged across the ground. Suddenly, he hit the ground with a sickening thud, the impact knocking the breath from his lungs. Sajid gasped for air, struggling to rise to his feet. As he did, he found himself in a new place, twisted and nightmarish. The landscape was like a warped version of the real world. There were half-formed structures, some like cities, some like forests, that loomed grotesquely in the distance, but none of it felt real. Everything was bathed in a sickly green light. There were no sounds of life, only a strange, persistent hum that vibrated in his chest. And then he saw them. Figures, human-like but not human. Their faces were elongated and distorted, their eyes hollow and black, staring with an intensity that seemed to pierce through his very soul. They didn't move like people. They dragged themselves across the ground, their limbs twisted in unnatural angles, their bodies half decayed. Sajid stumbled backward, horrified. He had seen things like this in nightmares, but this was real. "This is your punishment, Sajid Khan," a voice echoed, one that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. "You were never meant to die, but now you must stay. You will become one of us." Sajid's heart raced, his body trembling with terror. The figures drew closer, their movements slow but deliberate, like predators closing in on their prey. He turned to run, but his legs felt heavy, like they were sinking into the ground with every step. The whispers grew louder. He could feel their presence all around him, and then a sharp pain shot through his chest, like something was pulling at his very soul. He fell to his knees, gasping for breath. "No, I'm not like them," he screamed. But it was too late. The darkness consumed him and his body went still. Was Sajid's fate sealed, or had he simply witnessed the terrifying truth that lay beyond life? Could there be a way to escape the hellish nightmare that awaited those trapped between life and death? One thing is certain. Death was not an end for Sajid Khan, but the beginning of a horror that would follow him forever.